Hey there. So, picture this. You're an FBI agent. You've been chasing a prolific bank robbery crew for years. The clues you have? Witnesses describe them as calm, professional, and well, old. Like really old. One of them might have even used a cane. You're not hunting some desperate, twitchy young criminals. You're chasing a group of men who, by all accounts, should be more worried about their golf handicap or their grandkids' soccer games than pulling off a flawless heist. And yet, they're beating you. Every single time. Welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is Underworld Kings, the rise and fall from Light Not Studios. Today, we're stepping away from the mafia hitmen and the drug cartel lords to tell a story that's almost charming, until you remember it's still a crime spree. This is the story of the Candy Store Gang, a crew of elderly bank robbers who outsmarted, outran, and utterly baffled the FBI for nearly a decade. It all starts in the late 1990s, in the sun-drenched, seemingly peaceful suburbs of Southern California. Banks began getting hit by a crew with a signature style. They were polite, they were efficient, and they were incredibly careful. They wore gloves, hats, and sunglasses. They used rental cars, switched plates, and vanished without a trace. They never fired a shot. They never even raised their voices. They'd walk in, present a note to the teller, a note that was always polite, often including the word please, and walk out with the money. They were so smooth, so calm, that tellers sometimes described the experience as surreal, even professional. And every witness, without fail, said the same thing. These men were senior citizens. One was tall and lean, another was shorter and stockier. One might have a cane. They moved with the deliberate pace of men who've seen a few decades. The FBI dubbed them the Candy Store Gang, because hitting banks, to them, seemed as easy as taking candy from a baby. And for years, that's exactly what it was. From 1999 to 2008, this crew is believed to have pulled off over 24 robberies, netting close to $1 million. The FBI was stumped. These weren't your typical bank robbers leaving behind DNA on a half-eaten burger or boasting in some dive bar. These were ghosts with gray hair. The agents had a pile of security footage, but it just showed these older gentlemen, faces obscured, moving with a calm that felt almost disrespectful to the entire concept of law enforcement. How do you find men who blend into retirement communities, who might be spending their weekends at hardware stores and their weekdays robbing banks? The pressure was immense. The media loved the story, of course, the geriatric gang outfoxing the G-men. It was a public relations nightmare for the Bureau. The break, as it often does, came from a tiny mistake. In 2008, after a robbery in Anaheim, investigators got a lucky lead. They tracked a suspect vehicle back to a hotel, and there, they found a receipt. This receipt led them to a man named Anthony Ribato. Tony was 71 years old. He had a record, but it was from another lifetime, a bank robbery conviction back in the 1960s. He'd done his time, vanished, and presumably settled into a quiet life. But the FBI started watching him, and the picture began to develop. They saw him meeting with other older men. There was 71-year-old William Bill Glasgow, a former aerospace engineer, no less. And there was 69-year-old Terry Brown, a former mortgage broker. This was their crew. The Candy Store Gang wasn't just a couple of old guys. It was a syndicate of seniors, a well-organized team with specific roles, drivers, lookouts, vault men, all drawing on a lifetime of experience, just not the kind of experience you'd put on a resume. The takedown was careful. They arrested Ribato first, then Glasgow and Brown. The evidence was solid, forensic, financial, photographic. But the real insight came not from the evidence locker, but from understanding their why. This wasn't about getting rich quick or funding a flashy lifestyle. These men were in their late 60s and early 70s. They'd lived through careers, through failures, through the quiet desperation that can settle in when retirement isn't the golden years you were promised. Some had financial pressures, sure, but listening to the prosecutors and the investigators talk, you get a sense it was about something else, too. It was about relevance. It was about the thrill. It was about proving they still had the nerve, the skill, the value in a world that had largely passed them by. For them, the bank wasn't just a target, it was a stage. And for a few minutes during each heist, they weren't invisible old men. They were the most capable, feared people in the room. There's a poignant, almost tragic layer to this. Terry Brown, The former mortgage broker told the judge at his sentencing that he was just trying to take care of his family, that he felt he had no other options. Anthony Ribato, the career criminal, seemed to have just never left that life behind. But Bill Glasgow, the aerospace engineer, that one makes you pause. Here was a man who had contributed to building advanced machines, who had a sharp, analytical mind. In another universe, that same mind he used to plan heists could have been consulting, teaching, building something legitimate. Instead, he used it to calculate getaway routes and timing. They were all sentenced to substantial prison time, years that, at their age, were essentially life sentences. The judge called their actions shocking and brazen. And just like that, the candy store gang was closed for business. I think about this story a lot, especially from my perspective as an engineer and an entrepreneur. We're taught to solve problems, to optimize systems, to find efficient paths to a goal. The candy store gang, in the most twisted way, did exactly that. They identified a problem, their need for money, purpose, or adrenaline, and engineered a solution. They mitigated risk with meticulous planning. They executed with calm precision. They were, in a dark sense, masterful project managers. But of course, the fatal flaw in their design wasn't operational. It was ethical and human. They optimized for the wrong outcome. They channeled their intelligence, their patience, their lifetime of accrued skill into a venture that was always going to collapse. The same life experience that made them so good at the job also made them ghosts in the machine of society, which is what made them so hard to catch, and which ultimately makes their story so isolating. It's a stark reminder that a rise isn't always about power or money. Sometimes it's about a fleeting feeling of competence and control, and the fall isn't always a dramatic shootout. Sometimes it's a quiet arrest at a suburban home, the closing of a cell door on men who should be worrying about arthritis, not a parole hearing. They outran the FBI for a decade, but they couldn't outrun time or the inevitable consequence of their chosen path. Thanks for joining me for this unusual chapter in criminal history. If you found the tale of the candy store gang as fascinating as I do, please do share this episode with a friend. It's conversations about stories like these that make the podcast world so rich. For more deep dives into the most compelling rises and falls, make sure you're subscribed to Underworld Kings wherever you get your podcasts. This has been Abnul J. Farabi. Our production house, Light Knot Studios, is dedicated to bringing you these meticulously researched stories. You can find out more about all our shows at lightknotstudios.com. Until next time, take care.